Ladies and gentlemen, I am sitting here with one of the great leaders that we are experiencing and we are hearing. Some of us are seeing him for the first time. I've actually gotten an opportunity a few weeks back to really watch and listen to Mr. Roger Jardine. And the more I listen to him, the more I realize that there's wisdom. I wish there's a book that he had written, but I'm going to ask him all about his background and what he's going to do for us as we go into the elections in 2024. Mr. Jardine,
Okay, thank you.
how are you, sir?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm good, thank you. I know our seating is very comfortable,
Yeah.
so I want you to be comfortable
Can I look
so
at
that,
you?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
so that
Okay, cool.
we
Yeah.
we sort of maybe hear more about you. I've listened from your speech earlier today about Mr. Bill, and I've also read that there's Anne Jardine,
My
which
mother.
are your parents.
Yes.
Please tell me more about them.
Yeah. No, good. So my father was a member of the Gauteng legislature, the ANC, and a very well-loved activist. And I mentioned in the speech that he disappeared for 2 weeks,
Yes,
coming from the funeral in Craddock. He was a big influence in my life, and he was a rugby man. So part of growing up, we played rugby. And so I know about rugby here in Becha,
yes,
and I know about the legends pre 94 because my father was actually the convener of the South African Rugby Union selectors for the national team.
yeah,
And then he knew, and he was very good friends with Dan Teke. They were good friends. Mono Badela was a good friend of his.
yes,
I grew up around these people. Silas and Kanuno was a good friend of his. Silas and Kanuno. So he was a political activist, a sports activist, a community activist. And you know, he always used to, in fact, now that I'm thinking about it, he used to say, you're going to change something, just start with one person.
yes,
And basically, change starts with me. Change starts now. And I'm thinking about the link between those messages I got as a young man and my father. So he was very active in rugby, and he was married to Anne Jardine, Anne Christian. My mother was a seamstress. She worked in a factory. And it became very clear to us when we became teenagers that my mother was very good at mathematics, but she never finished high school. And we all respected her. She had great numerical skills. She still has. She's going to be 90 this year.
yeah,
And she's someone I turn to for advice and guidance. So that's my mom and my dad. On my father's side, his grandmother, Elizabeth, was from the Eastern Cape, from here. And she married my great grandfather. But that's the link to this part of the world.
yes, yes. And then usually people have a point in their lives that the question of leadership sort of is clarified. When was that point? How far back can you trace the first lessons about leadership that you got?
You know, leadership is not a formal thing, right?
Okay.
And I spoke about that today. We're all leaders in some way. In what you know, if you're on the team, and okay, so maybe you're the captain. That's a leadership position. But there's also a guy somewhere else who's guiding and just takes on that role. So for me, I always played team sport as a child, and in my family also, I was always encouraged to speak up and say things. You know, and so it sort of evolves. In fact, a few years ago, I was involved in a study with a human capital company. They were looking at CEOs and they were studying what they call the road to the top. And then they come and they interview you, and then you tell them your life story, and they try and figure out what got you to where you are.
Yes.
And when I thought about that, I realized that because my family always allowed me, whether I was the clown or the person making the birthday speech or whatever, to express myself. And I always encourage young people that I mentor in my family. When there's a function, I ask them to say something. And usually they're shy, eventually they say something, because I think it's a very important part of how you express yourself in groups, whether in the boardroom, church, or sports group. You have to be able to speak up and say how you feel about things. And then you extend that into taking the lead on an issue, you know? So it's a very simple thing.
Yes.
But I thought that was an important thing in terms of my development,
Yes.
you know? And, um, and other little, lessons where you can't take yourself too seriously, you know?
Okay.
I worked for a long time with a company where we used to say, don't take yourself too seriously, but take your work very
So,
seriously,
yeah.
you know? So you need to have an EQ that allows you to take criticism, different views. Um, just because you have the title doesn't mean you always have the answer. You must be willing to learn from people around you and surround yourself with really good, strong people.
And knowing that we don't have much time, but I'm sitting here with a captain of industry, and I want to find out, how do you rationalize your position, say, in a boardroom, in a way that you can teach me, someone who's never been in maybe some of the boardrooms that you said. How would you tell somebody who comes from a different context of how to carry themselves in those spaces?
I think it's a very important thing. Why do people hold back in meetings? Because they're not sure if they know the right thing or if they're going to say the wrong thing.
Yes.
And I suppose you have to put yourself out there. Obviously, you don't want to say or do things that are so wild that people think you're crazy, but you need to do a lot of preparation. You can't use the board as an example. You have to go in there, you need to have read all the papers, things you don't understand, you must ask. And you almost need to be confident, because I think often the things you're worrying about that you don't know, a lot of people in the room also are wondering about that. And then when you ask the question, they relieve that you asked the
Yes.
question, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. Yes.
And so you just have to have that inner conviction, self confidence to raise your issue and not feel diminished by it, So, and that confidence comes from a place, right? Um, and so it's good to find people. I've always been lucky because in my career there have been people more experienced that I've turned to. Never always took their advice, but I wanted to hear if what I was thinking sounded reasonable. Usually they'd say, this is a good idea, or they'd say, no, 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 And so taking advice is a very important part of growing
Into
as a
space.
leader, because remember, you become a leader, but you have to have people around you to do stuff. And if you're a great leader, then you have people who are very smart, sometimes smarter than you are, right?
Yes.
And you also know to turn to them to help you, to guide you, to give you suggestions. And that's the style that I think works better than people who get the title in the corner office and then they want to be the boss man. You know,
Yes.
I always tell people who work with me, just because I have that office, that doesn't give me all the wisdom in the world. I still know less than I knew yesterday, but I need your. So if you're a subject matter expert, I will take your advice and you'll tell me this is what I think, and we'll have the discussion. So it's very important to have that EQ. I've worked with a lot of very smart people, but they don't get very far because they don't have that ability to work with human beings.
Yeah.
other human beings. Maybe they never played rugby or something. I don't know.
Thank you for raising that. What is it that is in rugby that you could easily use in a boardroom? I'm using a boardroom as a space of meetings. It could be any organization as a space of order, of organizing a particular organization. What
Yeah.
can you take directly from the rugby field and actually apply on that context?
Yeah, I don't. Okay, so rugby just happens to be the sport that I love and am passionate
Yes.
about. But take any team sports: soccer, hockey, netball, basketball. I think anything that involves team sport, where you're working with others around an objective. In the case of sport, it's to win,
Yes.
and then you have your different players, and you all have to come together to get a result. And so, playing a team sport, and I think early in your life gives you that EQ, that social capital to step into a board or a working environment and know that you're going to get the best from everyone so that the team works together to reach a goal, which is winning, and in the case of business, sales or marketing objectives or whatever. So I think team sport, if you
Yes.
think of it, business is team sport, right? You're working with a lot of other people
Yeah.
to get a desired result.
Yes. And then moving from your experience in government as the former DG in Department of Arts and Culture, that was
Science
with
and
Science
technology.
and
Yeah.
Technology. It was a strange
Mm.
combination.
Mm-hmm.
And then taking that into business, where you chaired and you were a CEO of a big
Company. Mm.
organization, companies. What do you take from that context, and that could easily be brought, or that is needed actually,
Mm.
because we clearly as a country need new ideas, fresh ideas, as
Mm.
you
Mm.
reflected
Mm.
this
Yeah.
evening.
Yeah.
Um, what what are you bringing from that context into the space? I'll tell you why I'm asking this
Mm.
question, because Nelson Mandela um, reflected on this in 1999 in his last address in Parliament. One of the people that he gave credit to are the people in business that helped to build the country. And seemingly there's a negative perspective that seems to be coming if somebody comes from business
Mm.
into government.
Mm. So I think 30 years into our democracy, we we can certainly benefit from what we're calling social solidarity, which is, I mean, the government has been destroyed, people, money, whatever. And I think, so I was a DJ at a very young age. I was 29,
Yes.
right? And I've now seen things, and I would do things differently, you know. So I think the first point is that the public sector is not the private sector.
Mm.
There are different things that motivate them, but there's skills in the private sector that can be used. So, for example, for students, if you're on a NESFAS grant, what's happening now should not be happening. You should be able to get your full grant through a very simple payment channel. We have some of the best payment technology in this country. You should be able to get that money with the least margin being clipped by people who are not as skilled to deliver that money to you.
Yes.
Um, you know, if you're in a public hospital, there's ways to do records management. Why can you go to a public hospital, swipe your ATM card, and then go in, and then 6 months later you go in, and then they don't know who you are, but the bank knows what time you were there, how much money you had when
Mm.
you left. Yeah, it's records management. It's a very simple thing.
Yes.
So I think that cross pollination of ideas and experiences, and why I'm so excited to be embarking on this journey is I think I know where to find and who to work with to solve some of these issues that we are facing.
Yes.
Um, and and it's not about giving public goods to the private sector. It's about leveraging the private sector for public good.
And change starts now is our conclusion. And I really want you to say your piece, and then you can close on this. Is a fresh kid on the block, and it's still yet to be registered. What is happening in your mind right now, and where would you like this to go?
Yeah, so we are now embarking on these town hall meetings.
Yes,
We are spreading the message of change starts now. We're listening. I mean, today was a great listening afternoon.
yes,
And so as we now ramp up into the elections, we're going to contest the elections, and we're going to ramp up for a fully fledged party to go into the elections.
sure.
A lot of people say that we're late to the game. We think that if we approach this in a modern way, we won't be that late. We're not setting up a party with branches and
Okay,
policy conferences and that sort of thing. We want to go straight to voters, to citizens, because you are a citizen before you vote and after. It's just that everybody focuses on you around election time. But if you're a citizen, then you're actively involved in what happens.
and does that come from business, the strategy that you are employing to go into elections?
No, it's look, obviously strategies and tactics will come from lived experiences, right? In terms of how to practically do things.
Yes,
But our approach is really based on wanting to hear directly from the citizen. Because what happens is in a conventional system, you could actually be stifled by party bosses. You see that happening in parliament. So we're trying to change the culture of how we do things, which will basically be important to our democracy. Because you heard I said today, people want to be seen and they want to be heard. And right now we're invisible. We want to change that.
ladies and gentlemen, I've had the honor to sit and listen to Mr. Roger Jardine. In his conclusion, he's going to give us his 2-minute conclusion as to what should happen to somebody, or what should somebody do if they do not know what and who to vote for.
I think it's important with this election
Yes,
to be aware of the consequences of not voting and voting for the same party that you've always voted for into government. We need change, and the way we're going to change is by changing who we vote for. So I want to encourage everyone to take this seriously. The solutions to the many problems that we have been there, they just haven't been done. And they haven't been done because we have leaders who aren't focused on the people of this country and the resources to get things done. We've talked about infrastructure for a long time. We've talked about doing away with load shedding. We're sitting here in Gqeberha, the Eastern Cape, where water issues are so critical. You can change that. We can change that when we vote. So register to vote and vote for change.
thank you so much, sir. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you very
We
much.
would really like to spend an hour and a day
Yeah.
if it was possible, but I know time is money these days, and we really need to actually get back to the daily program.
Thank you
and
very
I
much.
know that it's actually busy for you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.